The echoing footsteps. In a forgotten little town stood a mansion known as the Blackwood Estate, which had lain abandoned for decades. A local legend spoke of the mansion as being cursed by a family that vanished without trace into one stormy night back in the 1920s. Still, ignoring these stories, one curious historian by the name of Claire tried to breach the estate in pursuit of an explanation for the ghastly aura that surrounded it. As Claire stepped into the house, she felt a chill right away. In this house, there were photographs on all walls that had faded with time, complemented by dusty furniture pieces, with every piece varnished in thick layers of neglect. She readied her camera and began exploring. After some time, however, she picked up something odd. Footsteps echoed through the halls. At first, Claire thought it was just her footsteps echoing back at her, but the sound soon grew louder, more rhythmic. It sounded like someone or something was pacing, out of sight. Following the sound, she entered into a grand staircase. The footsteps were louder now, almost like the cadence of someone coming down the stairs very, very slowly. Claire's breath caught in her throat as she turned toward the staircase. There, a dark figure materialized at the top of the stairs, barely visible in the poor light. Claire's camera began to malfunction and shoot distorted, blurred images of that figure, which seemed inching closer. The temperature dropped dramatically, and Claire felt an invisible hand touch her shoulder. In a state of panic, she ran downstairs only to find that the door was locked tight. In desperation, Claire managed to break a window and flee out into the night. She never returned to Blackwood Estate, but she couldn't get rid of that feeling that something had followed her. That night, while reviewing the footage, images were clear that she did not remember. The shadowy figure was right behind her, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The Forgotten Room. In this city, renovations were being carried out in one of the old apartment buildings. On top of all junk and debris, a contractor named Jake found a hidden door behind a false wall. The door was very ancient, with carvings that renounced a forgotten time. Despite the warnings from his colleagues, he decided to open it. Inside, it was a room closed off for decades. The air inside was stale, thick with the musty smell of neglect. It was a room fitted out in a style from the 1800s, replete with an ornate mirror, a dusty chandelier, and a rocking chair creaking softly under some unseen presence. Jake felt that although the mirror was grimed, it reflected more than that which was in the room. As he peered into it, he caught glimpses of a woman in old-timey dress, with a blurred face and eyes staring at him. It seemed like the woman was reaching out for help, and her silent scream almost came alive. Those nights, Jake had been plagued by lucid dreams. The lady from the mirror, caught in this certain cycle of repetition, trying to break out of the room, always landing into the very same spot. Every succeeding night, the vividness of the dream would intensify with the desperation of this woman. Unable to bear the torment, Jake returned to the apartment building, determined to understand what linked the room with his nightmares. He discovered that the room was associated with a woman named Eleanor, who vanished under strange circumstances when her family's fortune was stolen. The room was said to be her prison, her last moments of despair echoing through the ages. Jake finally found the answer and released Eleanor's spirit, which continued fighting. Now, even after knowing the mystery, he still could not get rid of the feeling that she was there, watching him in every shiny object. The Devil's Nursery. It was an old rotten house that was thought to be the Devil's Nursery in a village that was far from everything. It had a grim history in that it once homed orphans who appeared to vanish under very sinister circumstances. Paranormal investigator Alex decided to document the history of this house. As night fell, he set up his equipment in the nursery, a room loaded with antique toys and old cribs. The atmosphere in this room was oppressive, with the air heavy from a feeling of sadness and abandonment. Alex picked up some strange readings, a drop in temperature, odd voices, and flickering lights. Again, he looked around the room to see the toys starting to move on their own. A rocking horse moving very slowly, a music box playing some sort of sad lullaby. Then, out of nowhere, the silence was penetrated by the incoherent giggling of a child. Alex spun around and saw a ghostly child figure running between cribs. He pursued it, but it was always a little bit ahead of him. The temperature fell even lower. He could feel a cold, invisible layer touching him, giving him chills. Amongst all this chaos, Alex found an ancient journal hidden beneath the floorboards. The journal belonged to the headmistress of the orphanage, detailing horrific experiments she conducted on the children to cleanse their souls. The final entries of that journal told of how the spirits of the children were caught in the nursery and doomed always to relive their torment. As night wore on, their agony became increasingly real to Alex. The nursery was soon filled with the cries of unseen children, wailing louder and more desperate. Desperate to escape, he fled the house, never to forget the faces of tormented children that he had seen in those fleeting visions. They also say that up until today, the Devil's Nursery is still filled with the spirits of those poor kids trapped inside, and whoever enters the room will catch a glimpse of their sorrowful faces or hear their desperate cries for help.